Welcome back to the show, Dr. Cornel West.
Oh, thank you, my dear brother. When I think about you, I think of George Carlin. You know, the Union Seminary is right across the street from George Carlin Place.
Oh, really? No kidding.
What a grand genius. He grew up on 121st and Broadway next to Corpus Christi Church, and they got a beautiful sign saluting him. And beside Richard Pryor, he's got to be one of the greatest comic geniuses of the last 50 years, my brother.
Well, I certainly wish he was still alive right now, because I know he would see through all the propaganda that we've been living through, at least since 2015. But I want to just, before we start, I want to get this out there, because some people misunderstood my coverage of your appearance with Anderson Cooper, and they took it as an attack on you when I was merely trying to help you get the message right about the Ukraine war. Because as a radical, part of your job is to educate people on what's actually happening, and you have to be crystal clear in explaining it to people, especially about what's happening in Ukraine. So people took that as me trying to attack you when I was doing it more as a coach, trying to help you and get it right. And that's what I'm going to be doing in this interview also, because I was thrilled to hear that you're running third party. You got more courage than I do to do it. You're a better man than me. And so I appreciate you doing it, because you're getting the message out there about the Ukraine war, about the two-party duopoly. This is really important. And so if I just want to tell people, so if it seems like I'm being critical of Cornel West from here going forward to the election, what it is going to be is me trying to help make his message even better than it is, because I think it's really important that his message get out there. That's what this is about. So anyway, I just wanted to clear that up.
Oh, sure. I think the important thing always is, brother, that, you know, the anthem of Black folk is lift every voice, not lift every echo. You got a voice. I've got a voice. Our voices overlap. Our voices can have tension. Our voices can conflict. We can learn from one another. We proceed. We've got a similar critique of the predatory capitalist society. We've got similar critique of a whole host of issues, and certain things we disagree with. Well, that's understandable too. I'm learning from you, you learning from me. But it's the respect more than anything else that's crucial here. And I think I appreciate you starting off with that kind of reflection, my brother. Very much so.
So now people make a big deal out of the fact that you endorsed Joe Biden in 2020. And now you're running against him. And the reason what was the reason you endorsed him in 2020, and what has changed since?
Yeah, one, I was thoroughly convinced that we needed an anti-fascist coalition, and that included the kind of milquetoast warmongering neoliberals like Biden. And now it's fairly clear Biden had 4 years. He had 4 years to steal the thunder from any kind of Trump challenge. 4 years to try to speak to the needs of poor and working people, 4 years to try to cut back on the military adventurism. That's been characteristic of his whole career. And it's clear to me now that if the only opposition to the escalating neo-fascism in the country is going to be Biden, or Biden-like, then the fascism's coming anyway. We're going to have alternative vision, alternative institutions, alternative infrastructures. It has an alternative passion. And so if all we can do is produce democratic administrations that are caretakers, postponers of the Trump or Trump-like candidates, then the fascism's coming anyway. The only way you really get at the roots of fascism is to break from the corporate duopoly, to show how the two-party system is an impediment for the unleashing not only of American democracy, but also trying to dismantle the empire in terms of the 800 military units around the world, and the military budget taking 57 cents for every dollar. And so in that sense, there's been a shift. There's no doubt about that. Now, keep in mind, you know, I supported Ralph Nader and Jill Stein. And in between, I had early supported Bill Bradley, and I had supported John Kerry as a kind of anti-right-wing coalition too. So that my jazz-like activities certainly can be characterized at times with a certain kind of inconsistency, but it's the timing of it. Each moment has its own context.
So now our friend Nick Cruz says that many climate activists have no idea how much they destroyed all their credibility by endorsing and supporting Joe Biden, the Nord Stream pipeline bomber, and the largest eco-terrorist in modern human history for president. Why should anyone take climate or environmental issues seriously when you obviously do not? Now, what do you say back to that kind of critique that by endorsing him, you lose your credibility?
Well, it becomes, I mean, I think, I've been on my dear brother's show a number of times, and I think there's always a certain force in the argument of trying to be consistently third party across the board, having no relation whatsoever to the bourgeois politicians. I think there's force to that. But I think the credibility that one has really is holistic. It's wholesale rather than just retail. And the credibility that you have in regard to being consistently against war, consistently against capitalism, consistently against white supremacy, even if it has different kind of stances from one election to the next. That would be one of the ways in which I would try to respond to that. That would be the beginning of a response to that.
Okay. Here's another tweet from Nick. He says the same professional managerial class gaslighters want us to take it easy on Bernie. They use civility politics as a weapon so they can comfortably sell out. The working class must reject this and start holding these people accountable for selling us out. So Bernie has sold us out, and I don't need you to call him a sellout or anything. That's fine. But I do want to see, this is your response, because Bernie was asked about your campaign, and he said it shouldn't happen, and he's against it, and he's endorsing
right.
Biden, and of course that is just garbage. And so this is how you responded.
And you even in love, people have deep disagreements about these things. But I think again, he's fearful of the neo-fascism of Trump.
So when my what I would say to you here, and this is a big point, and I'm trying to impress upon you going forward, that when you do that, you sound a little bit like Joe Biden, and what you're doing is you're giving a pass to Bernie Sanders and anybody else for voting lesser of two evils. So you're endorsing the Democrats' message in their campaign. And so now people can dismiss your candidacy and say, well, we got to worry about the neo-fascism of Trump, as if Joe Biden isn't worse, which he is. He's a bigger fascist. And he just crushed a union strike on the railroad, which is the definition of fascism. He's now trying to saber rattle with two nuclear powers, nuclear war, nothing more important than that. And what he's doing in Ukraine, you know exactly what he's doing, right? So he's the worst warmonger in the world. 300,000 Ukrainians have already been slaughtered in this proxy war that was provoked by NATO, which you know. So when do you think that when you say that about, when you call Donald Trump a neo-fascist and you don't say that about Joe Biden, what do you say when I tell you that you're undercutting your own campaign and you are propping up the Democratic message, which is that they are the lesser of two evil and you have to vote for Joe Biden so we don't have fascism? By the way, we already have fascism. As we all know, fascism is the joining of corporate and government to screw the worker. And that's exactly what Joe Biden, the Democrats, and Pete Buttigieg did. And so they will keep doing it, and they're not stopping it. And they're also for censorship, which is the hallmark of fascism. So this idea that Donald Trump is more of a fascist than Joe Biden undermines your own campaign. There's no doubt about that. And so what I would encourage you to stop doing that. What do you say back?
No, we deeply disagree on that, though, brother. I don't think, and this is why I disagree with Nick too, that, and I appreciate your advice here, cast in a respectful way, but we do, and I disagree with Brother Nick on this too, that I just got back from Mississippi. You know that. You know what the Jenkins and Parkins, the two brothers brutalized by the police. There at the church, the Klan still running wild, not just with votes, but terrorizing black folk. The Goon Squad finally got caught by the two lawyers, Brother Malik and Brother Trent. Now, what does that mean? That means that when you talk about fascism, you're talking not just about the rule of big money, not just the rule of big military, not just the rule of corporate power so that it's oligarchic in essence. But you're also talking about dictatorial rule, no elections, the elimination of dissident voices, and then the scapegoating of the most vulnerable, which it could be immigrants, it could be workers, it could be Black people, Jews, Arabs, and so forth. See, under Biden, what you have is a fascist dimension domestically, especially against Black folk and others. You and I, the very fact that we're having this dialogue without being eliminated overnight, a fascist regime could completely call into question with the use of arbitrary power. That's what happens in the mass incarceration regime vis-a-vis poor Black people and others. Right? So that is the fascist dimension. Similarly so in terms of militarism abroad. So that there's fascist elements, my brother, there's fascist dimensions. But with Trump, when you have calling into question transfer of power and so forth, that is not the same thing. And so that doesn't undermine my campaign at all. The campaign's about truth.
100% undermines your campaign. 100%. You're shooting yourself right in the dick before you even start. So that's just bad. You're getting bad advice. I don't know who's advising you, but they're giving you horrible advice.
January. I'm a free man. I'm a free man, brother.
So January.
But I want to hear your argument. I want to hear your argument as to how Biden is more fascist than Trump.
Trump
just lay it out right quick.
Well, I'll tell you right now, the reason why the deep state Russiagated Trump was because he wouldn't bomb enough to calm them down. So he wouldn't do enough bombing. The reason they impeached him because he wouldn't ship arms to Nazis in Ukraine, and he was against that. So that's
are you defending Trump as somehow being a person who is? I don't understand. I don't stand your argument at this point, though, man. What are we talking about?
Okay, there's.
I want to understand what the content of your argument is, because one can, in fact, bring critique to bear on the system as a whole with the two corporate wings, but somehow, what do you say to trans and gays and lesbian brothers and sisters in terms of their rights?
So that's again. Joe Biden is responsible for the mass incarceration, not Donald Trump. Who is more responsible for Black and brown people being locked up and America being the largest penal colony in the world? Is it Donald Trump or would it be Joe Biden? By the way, this conversation is a loser for your campaign. Sitting here trying to make the argument.
It could be a loser for you too, though.
Trying to make the argument.
You trying to make the case that somehow the Democrats are more fascist than the Republicans. The fascism cuts across the board.
But that's not how you say it, though. You say it's only Donald Trump. You don't say it cuts across the board. You call Joe Biden milquetoast, and you call Donald Trump a fascist. So you're not saying Joe Biden is a fascist, really?
I said there's fascist dimensions to the Biden project. You're absolutely right.
It's like you're campaigning for Joe Biden almost when you're doing this. That's what it sounds like.
That's ridiculous. That's ridiculous.
But that's what I'm not saying you are doing that. I'm saying that's what it sounds like.
What it sounds like to you. That's what it sounds like to you. And you got a right to be wrong. You got a right to be right. It sounds like to you. But it doesn't sound like that to a whole host of others at all, though, brother. Not at all.
All right. Again, I'm saying this out of love for you because I do have deep love for you. I have deep respect for you. And we agree on almost everything except the message of your campaign, right? That's the only thing. I would hope it would become even more focal. Well, let me just put it this way.
But are you suggesting that the message should be that Biden is a greater fascist than Trump? Is that what you're saying?
I'm not saying that you should talk about fascism or any of that stuff. I think you should.
No, fascism is very real.
I think
you don't think fascism is real in the country?
We're living in it. We're living in fascism.
But I'm talking about escalating in terms of intensity.
It has since Biden became president. It certainly has escalated in intensity. They've censored everybody. They've crushed unions. They've started another war, and now they're saber rattling with 2 nuclear powers. I don't know how I don't know how worse it could get. And by the way, he still hasn't let people out of prison. He still hasn't given student loan. He's still denying us health care. He's an enemy of the worker and a tool of military-industrial complex and Wall Street. 2023. There's no bigger fascist in the country than Joe Biden. The reason why black and brown people are locked up again isn't because of Trump. It's because of brother Biden. And Joe Biden is proud of that. He brags about that. He brags about the crime bill, and he will never apologize for it. So I'm just letting you know that I really want your campaign to pick up traction. This is the opposite way to do it. Who's ever advising you sounds like an infiltrator.
But why you keep saying advise me? I'm thinking for myself, brother. I'm a
okay.
free
I don't mean to
black
insult you.
man.
That's not
just a question of advising.
okay.
I don't ask who's advising you. You thinking for yourself. You're a free man too, aren't you?
You're right. You're right. Okay. I was trying to put it in a nice way.
I use that kind of language, my brother. You want to be respectful.
I'm trying to be respectful. That was my.
I appreciate it.
Okay.
I know it look like it's hard sometimes, but I appreciate it. But we just have disagreements on these things.
Again,
if I undermine the campaign for you, then you free to have your own view and vision, and people are free to listen to you and be persuaded or not. And I've got mine. I'm listening for your insight. Absolutely right. No doubt about that.
So let me just say this. So the point of running a third-party campaign is to offer an alternative to the two major parties, to bring together disaffected members of those parties, along with independents and others who feel alienated from the political system as it exists. And the best way to do this is by running on economic issues that unite us, but which neither major party is willing to address because they're both beholden to the same powerful corporate interests. The Democratic Party long ago abandoned the working class in favor of beating the drum on cultural issues, and now that's all the Democrats have to run on. So if voters are looking for a party running on trans rights and calling Donald Trump and his supporters white supremacists, they can already vote for Democrats. The role of a third party is to focus not on the identity politics that divide us, but on core economic issues that unite us along class lines, like Christian Smalls did at Staten Island. Do you think he led with LGBTQ trans rights and white supremacy, or do you think he organized along class lines? That's what we have to do. You have to organize, meet people where they are. So what is your plan to organize along class lines, or are you going to keep talking about white supremacy and all those identity politics, which are there, not from the ground up, from the top down, to make sure we stay divided? What is your plan to organize along class lines?
Well, I appreciate again the clarity and candor of what you have to say. We have profound disagreements, brother. When I organize around white supremacy, I'm not making some utilitarian calculation. I'm speaking as a black man who comes out of a tradition that's been terrorized and traumatized by white elites. And that does not in any way mean it takes me away from class issues. Class issues are crucial. Class issues are fundamental. But it doesn't mean that I'm putting up with white supremacy. One of the problems is that you get too many folk who want to talk class, and can't say a mumbling word about white supremacy, police brutality. Can't say a mumbling word hardly. Or when they do say it, you call it identity politics as if it's not connected to class. I'm hitting these head on. I'm standing with the workers when it comes to strikes. I'm standing with the workers when it comes to greedy bosses. I'm standing with the workers when it comes to obsession with profits and the needs not in any way being satisfied. But I'll never for a minute be silent or not raising my voice in terms of vicious treatment of black people, indigenous people, gay brothers, lesbians, sisters, or trans. It's not an either or. And that's where you and I have a deep, profound disappointment. So if I see, for example, if I watch your show and I notice you hardly say a mumbling word about white supremacy because it's some kind of identity politics and I'm against it, but I don't want to talk about it. I only want to talk about what people hold in common. Well, black people are not going to hold it in common if you don't say a word about white supremacy, but maybe some of your white friends will. So who are you talking about? You're talking about in common. Are you talking about just a majority or what, my dear brother? I will never, ever in a million years not talk about vicious legacies of white supremacy, male supremacy, homophobia, transphobia, and others. But class will always be very much at the center. What brings you and I together is what? Our fundamental solidarity with working classes, not just here, but around the world. But oftentimes when I hear about your show and you say, well, you know, these identity politics issues get in the way. No, it's 100%. Not getting in the way. They're not getting in the way.
100%. They're used by so the Democrats, that's all they have to run on. And when you say that stuff, You just sound like a Democrat because that's all they have.
But
so
that's
if
exactly
you
wrong.
need,
if to talk about the dignity of black people in the face of vicious white supremacy makes me sound like a Democrat, you got the wrong earplug.
Okay,
you're not listening clearly. Because if you can't hear the critique of Wall Street, if you can't hear the critique of militarism, if you can't hear the critique of his foreign policy in Ukraine, and all you can hear when they talk about white supremacy is identity politics, then something's wrong with your earplug, though, brother. Something's wrong with you. Okay. We just have deep disagreement with that. But
it's disappointing.
It is what it is. You are profoundly disappointing in that sense. But if I still love you, brother.
I still love you too. I still love you too. I know you. I know you. I don't disagree with what you're saying. I'm talking about having a campaign. I'm not. There's a okay. So,
but the campaign is not about utilitarian calculation either. I don't look at black people like a utilitarian calculation. I can't say nothing because these people over here somehow are alienated. I'm telling the truth. I'm fighting for justice. And if people feel as if to talk about white supremacy is alienating, then they're going to be alienated. I'm talking about my mama. I'm talking about my daddy. This ain't no abstract dialogue about politics in the Machiavellian sense. Not at all,
so
my brother.
When Bernie caught...
We march together for class politics. We march together because that's real. But if you think that talking about white supremacy is just identity politics, we got deep disagreement. That's all. So I'm sorry to go on, and you're very kind to let me go.
No, go right ahead. No, go right ahead. I don't. And honest, everything I'm saying here coming from my heart. I want your campaign to succeed, and I want you to have the strongest campaign possible. But Bernie caught on because he would always, if he was given a cultural question or an identity politics question, he would always bring it back to class and economics. And it doesn't, well, here I was talking to one of Bernie's campaign managers, and this is what he said. Yes, I personally agree white supremacy is one of the causes. But if I lose two potential allies because they roll their eyes and stop listening before I get to their concerns, I've already lost. The civil rights advancements, women's rights, the environmental movement, they didn't happen because people like my dad voted Democrat because that stuff mattered to them. It happened because Democrats appealed to them on economic issues, and a lot of the Democrats they voted for because of economics also happened to vote for that other stuff. And it doesn't work in the inverse. So I'm just giving that to you.
No, I understand. But you can see again how I disagree. Keep in mind, bro. Civil rights movement was not because of white folk doing X or Y. It was because it was a social movement led by black people in the South that was multiracial, but led primarily by black folk. And neither party would have done anything without that social movement.
100% right. You're 100% right. No doubt about it. And I think
but that's my tradition. That's my tradition. How can you talk about?
No, I love to hear you talk about all that stuff. And that's good for a radical black activist who's representing his community. But I'm just trying to impress upon you that there's better ways to run a presidential campaign. And so that for a black radical activist, that's great. That's honey. But for someone who's trying to appeal to a wide swath of people, disaffected Republicans, independents, people, that's a death for that campaign. That's my opinion. That's just...
Well, yeah, we'll have to see. But keep in mind, though, brother, that one, I've never, ever said that all of the followers of Brother Trump are fascists. I said he's a neo-fascist Pied Piper. His followers, 1 out of 8 went with Bernie, 1 out of 12 went with Barack Obama. He's got a heterogeneous, diverse group. And I can speak my language of truth and justice as it connects to capitalism, imperialism, white supremacy, male supremacy, transphobia, whatever it is. And there's going to be some people who listen, and there's going to be some people who don't. But this is not just a question of political calculation and Machiavellian reflection, brother. This is about the quest for truth and justice. You got to be real. You got to be authentic. I'm not listening to consultants who tell me to use this particular kind of language with this group and this kind of language with that group. That is the essence of managerial bourgeois politics. I reject it.
So I heard you say one time that someone asked you that same question. Why don't you call Joe Biden a fascist, but you call Donald Trump a fascist? And one time you said that it was because Donald Trump criminalizes and demonizes his political opponents, And that's what fascists do. Well, of course, now they've been trying to criminalize and put in jail Donald Trump, Joe Biden's number one political opponent, just like they did in Brazil and Pakistan. And so the global elite is doing this to anybody, and they'll do it to you if you actually become a threat. They will criminalize you. They've already started to call you right-wing and white supremacist yourself. And that's the game. They'll call you a sexist. They're going to call you, your followers are going to be sexist, violent, racist, and white supremacist. All that. You're already been called a right-winger by the establishment. So that's the game that they play. And what they're doing right now is trying to throw in prison anybody who the donor class doesn't want to run and is going to win. They'll throw in prison. They'll do it to Bernie. They russiagated Bernie. They said all his followers were sexist and racist and violent. They said the same thing that they say about Trump. And they would have criminalized Bernie and put him in jail if he had a spine and he would have stood up to the establishment instead of folding into it. So it's important, I think, that people call out what's happening right now. I don't like Trump one bit. I oppose almost everything he says. And but he called for ending NATO, so I join him with that, and I'll join with anybody to do good and nobody to do wrong. Okay.
Same here. I'm with you I'm with you on that too.
And so what's happening right now is what they usually do in third world countries, but they're doing it right here. The donor class doesn't want Donald Trump to become president, and he will if he's allowed to run. And so they did this. They're now 4 different indictments, each one more ridiculous than the last. And here, RICO, the Georgia anti-racketeering law, is being used to charge Donald Trump. And now the reason I bring this up is because they're the same people that did that to Donald Trump are using the RICO charges to go after activists from Stop Cop City. So let me just give you the story and then you can comment on it. So
Sure.
Georgia prosecutors have filed racketeering charges against 61 people accused of involvement with Stop Cop City, a protest movement against a controversial Atlanta police training facility. The list of defendants suggests that the case implicates people who have already been arrested on tenuous evidence, like a legal observer who was jailed while monitoring protests, activists who ran a bail fund for other defendants, and a trio of activists arrested while handing out flyers with the name of a cop who killed a fellow protester. The RICO charges come as Georgia's RICO statute receives national attention. Donald Trump and a collection of his associates were charged under the state's severe RICO statute last month. The same grand jury that indicted Donald Trump on RICO charges also indicted the Stop Cop City defendants. Are you getting the game now? The Atlanta Journal-Constitution reported that on Tuesday, the Cop City Vote Coalition, a group that gathered more than 100,000 signatures to put the facility's construction up for a vote this year, condemned the charges as authoritarian measures by Georgia Attorney General Chris Carr. The group also noted that charging documents described the alleged racketeering scheme as beginning before the police training facility was even announced. Lauren Reagan, executive director of the Civil Liberties Defense Fund, which has been working in support of defendants, said the scope of the case is designed to dissuade people from supporting the Stop Cop City movement. It's been very clear that Georgia's intentions and how they've conducted themselves regarding the resistance to Cop City has been to try and scare even above ground law-abiding participants from taking part. I think by roping in a legal observer and people running a nonprofit and running a lawful bail fund is absolutely intended to scare people from supporting this cause now and in the future. In September of 21, Atlanta approved plans to build a police training facility dubbed Cop City by opponents in the city's South River Forest. The plans were controversial. Approximately 70% of locals who weighed in during a public comment opposed the facility, citing its cost, $90 million, its environmental impact, and its potential effect on over-policing in Atlanta. When the city moved ahead with the plans for construction, activists protested on the proposed construction site. Police shot and killed a protester, Manuel Tortuga Esteban Paez Terán, in January when they accused Terán of firing a gun. Subsequent autopsies have cast doubt on those claims. Soon after Terán's killing, police charged 19 more Stop Cop City activists with terrorism, despite many being accused of nothing more than misdemeanor trespassing around the proposed construction site. In a later crackdown, police conducted mass arrests at Stop Cop City Music Festival, accusing some people of engaging in property damage at a nearby protest. On the questionable basis that those people allegedly had mud on their shoes. The music festival was held in a forest. One of those legal observers was an attorney with the Southern Poverty Law Center and the National Lawyers Guild. Footage appears to show Thomas Jurgens being arrested while wearing one of the neon green hats that identifies NLG legal observers. We had some differences. When I say we, I mean myself and the Attorney General's office about who should be charged with what they should be charged with, Boston told WABE. She added that Jurgens' case was one of the touch points of a number of touch points that ultimately led me to make the decision that I have made here now. The value set of our office is that I will only proceed on cases that I believe I can make beyond a reasonable doubt. The RICO charges also name 3 activists who were arrested this summer and charged with money laundering and charity fraud connected to their work running a bail fund that supported Stop Cop City defendants. Prosecutors allege that the trio committed felonies by spending some of the fund's money on such things as gasoline, forest cleanup, totes, COVID rapid tests, media, yard signs, and other miscellaneous expenses. Marlon Couts, one of the bail fund organizers named in the RICO charges, told the Daily Beast that the indictment was part of an effort to discredit activists. These indictments are just the latest chapter in a long-running campaign by Governor Kemp and Atlanta authorities to terrorize political activists. Since the beginning of the movements against Cop City, the Georgia Attorney General has shown a willingness to abuse the legal process as a weapon against political opposition. Judges have questioned the constitutionality of their methods, and even local prosecutor Sherry Boston has publicly condemned this prosecution as baseless and refused to participate. Make no mistake, this indictment is not about enforcing the law. It's a desperate overreach in an attempt to discredit legitimate political opposition, and it won't work. That's exactly what they're doing to Donald Trump. That's exactly what they'll do to you. That's exactly what they'll do to Bernie Sanders. That's exactly what they'll do to me. They'll do to anybody who is a threat to the establishment. And
Let
so,
me get a word in. Let me get a word in.
So I'm going to let you. So I just want you to. So
Absolutely.
Go ahead. Take it where you will.
I'm very glad that you're zeroing in on the struggle to shut down Cop City. I'm in deep solidarity with them. We're working together in the coming weeks, virtually and so forth. But there's a logical fallacy, a rational gap in your attempt to compare freedom fighters against a vicious system in the name of everyday folk in ghettos, in hoods, and working class communities against the police versus Trump. Trump, I'm not in solidarity with Trump. I want him to have a fair trial. I'm not in solidarity with Trump, simply because they use the same law against courageous, visionary freedom fighters against police brutality and police murder versus the same law against a gangster like Trump. Doesn't put Trump on a spectrum with freedom fighters, brother, at all. It doesn't put him on a spectrum at all. That's the fundamental difference between you and I in this case. But I'm glad you're talking about shutting down Cop City, because we know it's planned to be in a number of other cities as well. When I'm in Mississippi, it was a goon squad. The goon squad is shot through cities across the country. We saw it in Memphis, it's in Atlanta, it's in Chicago. But the idea of you recognizing that the same weaponization against these courageous freedom fighters is somehow on a spectrum with Trump, I radically reject that. I want a fair trial, but I think he's probably done a number of things that warrants a serious fair trial with him going to jail, but we shall see.
So you're for prosecuting the last president after he loses an election. You think that's a good way to run a democracy? Because again, you don't see the connection that this is the donor class criminalizing anybody who they don't like, and they'll do it to you, and they'll do it to Bernie, and they'll do it to anybody else. And so you don't have to like Donald Trump. I don't at all, but I see what the game is being played here, and you don't see that game being played. You don't see this game, really.
I see the game, the same law against the Proud Boys. I wanted a fair trial. I wanted to make sure they're treated, but at the same time,
They're doing
the
to the
fact that they are
problem.
being weaponized. But see, but I think your support of Trump is deeper than you're acknowledging. You keep saying, I don't like Trump. I don't like Trump. How can you compare Trump with freedom fighters against the police?
I'm not comparing. I'm not comparing that. I'm saying
yes,
that the.
You are. You
I'm saying no. I'm not. I'm not.
It is. Of course, they're going to use it against anybody who.
It's the government. Okay. That's amazing that you don't see this. It is unbelievable that you don't see this. This is such a loser for you.
We had this opportunity to show the deep differences. Very deep differences, though. But you do what you got to do, and I'm doing what I got to do, and I learned from you. And I hope you can learn a little bit from me, but we shall see.
The biggest story of my lifetime, if it wasn't Russiagate, which led directly to the Ukraine war, and I said it was going to in 2017 when they did this, and I told everybody at the Young Turks, they're going to use this to start a war, they're going to use this, and they did. And so here we are. And so what I want to, the second biggest story is probably the COVID lockdown, if not the biggest. And so many people who were supposed to be out in front on this dropped the ball. People like Noam Chomsky. So here's the Green Party, what they said. They said the Green Party, which you're running with, the Green Party of the United States Steering Committee strongly supports the use of vaccines, vaccine mandates, and quarantines as part of a comprehensive public health effort to curb and eradicate the novel coronavirus pandemic that has swept the globe since early 2020. The whole thing was a hoax. And here's what the Black Caucus of the Green Party said. They said the National Black Caucus of the Green Party of the United States strongly opposes the use of forced vaccination via mandates and the discrimination that is being generated around these policies. Lockdowns, mandates, and passports are the major issue of the day, with millions of people protesting against them worldwide. In fact, what has become known as the medical freedom movement is arguably the biggest and most diverse international movement in world history. Vaccine mandates and vaccine passports are among the most vile, unconstitutional, immoral, unscientific, discriminatory, and outright criminal policies ever forced upon the population, and goes against everything the Green Party stands for under social justice. These policies are coming from an out-of-control government at the behest of the pharmaceutical industry. The mainstream media and social media are also working in lockstep to censor any and all doctors, scientists, and investigative journalists who have an opposing view or who even question the current mainstream media orthodoxy. Workers are being forced out of their jobs, many with medical exemptions from their doctors. Students are being denied entrance to educational institutions. Needed medical treatment is being denied. Medical privacy is being violated. Constitutionally protected rights to movement and assembly, including the right to travel, are being threatened. Rights to normal societal participation are being decimated. It has taken a while, but more recently, many medical professionals, elected officials, and federal judges have come out fully against lockdowns, vaccine mandates, vaccine passports, and of course, massive censorship. The National Black Caucus of the Green Party of the United States adheres to the principle that informed consent in all personal health and medical decisions is an inalienable human right. Under no circumstances shall any medical treatment or procedure, including psychotropic medications, vaccines, or other injectable treatments, be mandated or coerced. Individuals should be allowed to protect and heal themselves in a manner that best supports their medical spiritual beliefs. So I just wanted I don't understand why you aren't outraged by that. Do you share the sentiment of the Black Caucus of the Green Party, and have you talked to them?
Well, one thing, it's good to have a Green Party where you have a variety of different voices that are clashing, and the tensions are very real. I think there's no doubt that the pharmaceutical company has played a disproportionate role in shaping public policy. I think the kind of concerns that you and RFK Jr. and others have certainly are well grounded in that sense. On the other hand, we know there's been a whole host of vaccines in regard to other kinds of illnesses that are much more effective. The question becomes making sure, and one of the things I want to do, I want to have a truth commission to find out exactly what was the level of corruption that took place during these years, be able to see not just the text, we know the books are out there, but to have a truth commission so that we can see what voices were marginalized, what voices were pushed aside, and make sure it never happens again. I resonate with the spirit of what my green Black brothers and sisters are saying, but the Green Party itself does allow this kind of disagreement and so on. But I'll say this though, brother, I know I got to go, but I must say, you see, this is where you and I do in some ways live in different worlds, because as crucial and as important as the issue of vaccines and the COVID situation was, when you say that's probably the most important issue in your lifetime or in the last 25 or 30 years, in light of all the wars, in light of what Palestinians are going through, in light of what workers are going through, 63% of them are living paycheck to paycheck, in terms of all the vicious attacks of the police and the murders and so forth, and yet this vaccine issue is the most important thing. I say, okay, that's my dear brother Jimmy. He's got a right to raise his voice. I'm not going to in any way push it away, but I just live in a different world. As important as vaccines have been, if I had another chance, I'd be leaning much more with the Black caucus. But when I think of the weightiest issues, vaccines does not come immediately to mind. It just doesn't. That's the kind of world we live in, brother.
Okay.
Maybe I spend,
Well, here it is. The Black business owners collapsed by 41%. Black business because of lockdowns. Do you care yet?
Well, no,
70,000 workers in one state were fired because of vaccine mandates. When are you going to care? Do they all have to be trans? When are you going to care about these workers? What are you going to care about? What are you going to care about this?
They have to be trans for me to care.
You don't care. You don't care. Why don't you care about this?
Why would you accuse me? Of course I care about it.
You're saying it's not important.
I didn't say it wasn't important. I said it was not the most fundamental issue in my lifetime the last 30 years.
Forced medical experiments? Forced medical experiments that the scheme.
Where's the nuance?
Oh my God.
Where's the complexity?
So you missed this story and you're not interested in getting it right.
You agree with Jimmy Dore.
So you missed this story and you're not interested. Well, Dr. West, I wish you the best. You know I love you. You know I support
you and your precious wife and your family. Stay strong, though, brother.
Okay, I wish you all the best. I love you. Thanks for coming on. I really do wish you all the best. And I just wish you had a clearer message to reach people, but you don't. It's muddled and it's a loser. So Dr. Peter Mercola, who we've had on the show and who was the leading guy pushing back on the COVID narrative, and he's one of the leading doctors in the world, the most cited in his field, the most referenced and most published.
Sounds like fringe to me.
Very fringe. So he has joined the wellness company to create a real change in healthcare. They offer everything from live telehealth appointments to medical emergency kits with ivermectin, which
Whoa.
the FDA now says doctors can prescribe for COVID. That's what the FDA said.
They were cracking down. Then they had to say it's okay.
That you can prescribe it. They don't say it works, but they say you can prescribe it. And doctor-formulated supplements to deal with post-pandemic ill issues like vaccine injuries and shedding, which is I actually was in a study because I was vaccine injured. And
they said wear a mask,
and they and so they have a protocol to help you get over it, and it helped me. The wellness company's it's called Spike Support Formula is a natural and by the way, I have to say the vaccine injuries are very rare.
Yeah, so
very
screw you
rare.
If you got one.
Very rare.
We don't have to think about you if it happened to you.
The wellness company's Spike Support Formula is a natural inflammatory supplement. Spike Support contains a unique combination of ingredients, most notably nattokinase, which I'm taking. I take nattokinase. And dandelion root extract. I'm not taking that. I should get some of that. These ingredients, by the way, anyway, dandelion root extract is, I know a guy who beat cancer with that. I'm not saying I'm not saying it does. I'm just saying
You're saying it's like dying with COVID as opposed to of COVID.
Yes.
He beat cancer with.
Yes, he beat cancer with it. These ingredients, when taken as directed, have been shown to help dissolve existing spike proteins and block future ones from binding to your cells while strengthening your immune system. If you're worried about circulating spike proteins, go to twc.health/Jimmy and grab a bottle of Spike Support and use code Jimmy to save 15% on your first order. That's twc.health/Jimmy and use the code Jimmy to save 15%. Hey, so come see us live on tour. We're going to be in Detroit, that's Rochester, Michigan, Tampa, Boca Raton, Orlando, Dallas, Houston, San Diego, Bloomington, Illinois, where I went to college, Indianapolis, Levittown, New York, and Red Bank, New Jersey. Go to jimmydore.com for a list of all those shows.